Usually, like what I just say, we have different identities that are attached to us. And somebody can be an employee at an organization, a man, a sole breadwinner in his family, a husband, a father, a son-in-law, a son to his parents, a heterosexual. And all these identities can interact and intersect within that person to affect his different outcomes. And these outcomes can either be educational attainment, occupational success, where he can or cannot afford to live, among other things. So, this is Dr. Anna Julia Cooper. She was the fourth Black woman to get a PhD. And I don't know PhD in what area. I forgot to check before class. So she was brilliant. And she was the first Black woman or the first scholar to uncover the concept of intersectionality. She realized that Black women fare differently from women in general, and they fare differently from black men. So they essentially face a double jeopardy. Being a woman and being Black affected their different life outcomes. And later on, another professor, Dr. Crenshaw, she talked about a very famous lawsuit pertaining to General Motors. 5 Black women filed lawsuits to General Motors or against General Motors because they weren't hired. Maybe because they were Black and women, who knows. And General Motors claimed that they weren't discriminatory. They had female employees in their companies already, so they weren't sexist. And they also had Black men on staff, so they weren't racist. And this Dr. Crenshaw was another scholar that uncovered the concept of intersectionality being portrayed in this scenario. And this paragraph here is another manifestation of intersectionality. Being disabled affect the life outcomes of men and women differently. In this case, maybe this person has at least 2 identities: the person's sex and the person's disability status. And this example talks about a man who was disabled due to a spinal cord injury, and he lived with his grandma and his brother. He depended on them to get by. And because of that, people question his manhood. Let's look at how disability affected a woman. This woman also has a disability. She stopped getting dates or catcall. But people sometimes volunteer to help her. So these 2 examples are manifestation of intersectionality. And they also show us how men and women fare differently due to their disability. People question the guy's manhood, and people question the lady's attractiveness is tied to their gender role stereotypes and gender-based expectations. And this is another manifestation of intersectionality. A gay man with cerebral palsy, a gay man who is disabled. And this person, he could not go to relax at a gay bar because these bars weren't wheelchair accessible. So we see from this example how intersectionality, being gay and being disabled, affected the person's life outcomes. In this case, the life outcomes would be wanting to relax at a gay bar, and he could not do so. And nobody does anything. Apparently, the owners of these bars do not want to make more profits and revenues. So the meaning of intersectionality would be two or more identities interacts and intersects within a person to affect the person's life outcomes. And this lady, she's also disabled. She had a connective tissue disorder. She used a wheelchair. And she's also heavier. She has at least 3 identities attached to her. So people judge her in a certain manner. People gave her negative gesture. And people assume that she's lazy. And being heavier affect men and women differently. This is another manifestation of intersectionality. And sometimes when people could not distinguish whether a heavier man looked like a man or a lady, he has on as both. It's going to affect him even more. He's not only considered unattractive but also unmanly. So this would be his life outcomes, unattractive and unmanly. Maybe it would be hard for him to get dates. And fat women are even more stigmatized. And according to research, fat white women are more stigmatized than other heavier women of color. And I don't know why. And heavier women who are heterosexuals are judged more severely than heavier women who are sexual minorities. And I also cannot figure out why. So, regardless, we see that the concept of intersectionality are being portrayed in here. A person's weight as one identity, a person's gender as a second identity, and maybe just 2 identities. Okay. A person's weight and gender. Okay, sorry. And a person's sexuality. Yeah. 3 identities attached within the person. Sorry. A person's weight, a person's gender, and a person's sexuality or sexual orientation intersect and interact within that same person to affect the person's life outcomes. And sometimes handicapped women, they fare a bit better than handicapped men. Like the case of Carol, people perceive her as helpless and they offer to help her. People perceive her as innocent or harmless. Maybe because she's on a wheelchair. So people perceive that she could not be violent. People perceive her as fragile and maybe childlike. And Carol's boyfriend, who was also handicapped, had a different experience. And he also happened to be black. So different identities occurred within the boyfriend. He's black, he's male, he's handicapped. At least three identities occurred within Clara's boyfriend. And they assume that he's disabled for committing a violent act. A negative stereotypes attached to a particular race and gender. Too bad, so sad. And in almost all instances, or in all instances, stereotypes are not true. They are oversimplified beliefs attached to another group due to our limited observations. So, intersectionality is also portrayed in the case of Clara's boyfriend. Okay, we are done.